in the vast emptiness of the Arizona desert, where dust devils dance and secrets hide beneath endless skies, Jake Brennan discovered something that would change his life forever. A poor ranch hand barely scraping by, he stumbled upon a crashed vessel unlike anything from this world. Inside, a dying creature reached out to him with eyes full of intelligence and desperation. Jake's act of compassion that night would trigger events beyond imagination, leading to a choice by his ruthless boss that would shake the very foundations of everything he believed about humanity, loyalty, and survival. The sun had barely kissed the horizon goodbye when Jake Brennan guided his battered pickup truck down the dusty trail toward the Henderson Ranch bunkhouse. His bones ached from another brutal day of mending fences under the merciless Arizona sun, and his wallet was as empty as the endless desert surrounding him. At 32 years old, Jake had nothing to show for his life except calloused hands, a stubborn sense of dignity, and a reputation as the hardest worker on Marcus Henderson's sprawling cattle ranch. Marcus Henderson was a different breed entirely. A self-made millionaire who transformed a modest cattle operation into a corporate empire. Henderson was known throughout 3 counties for his ruthless business practices and cold demeanor. He treated his ranch hands like replaceable equipment, paying minimum wage and offering no benefits. But jobs were scarce in this corner of Arizona, and Jake needed every penny to send home to his sick mother in Texas. That evening, as Jake drove through the remote southern pastures checking for strays, he noticed an unusual glow on the horizon. At first, he thought it might be a brush fire, but the light was wrong too blue, too steady, pulsing with an otherworldly rhythm. His curiosity overrode his exhaustion, and he steered his truck toward the strange illumination. What he found defied everything he knew about the world. Nestled in a small canyon, partially buried in the desert sand, was a craft of impossible geometry. Its surface seemed to shift and shimmer, reflecting colors that had no names. The metal, if it was metal, was smooth yet textured, warm yet cool, solid yet somehow fluid. A jagged tear in the hull revealed an interior bathed in that same ethereal blue light. Jake's heart hammered in his chest as he approached. Every rational thought screamed at him to leave, to drive away and forget what he'd seen. But something drew him forward, a sound, barely audible, that seemed to resonate not in his ears, but in his very bones. It was a call for help, universal and unmistakable. He climbed through the torn opening, his work boots crunching on crystalline debris that looked like broken stars. The interior was vast, impossibly larger than the exterior suggested. Strange symbols glowed along curved walls, and the air hummed with energy that made his skin tingle. Then he saw the being. It lay crumpled in what might have been a pilot's seat, its form both alien and strangely familiar. Standing perhaps 6 feet tall if it could stand, the creature had elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift between silver and deep blue. Its head was large, with enormous eyes that currently flickered with pain and weakness. But those eyes, when they focused on Jake, they held an intelligence and depth that immediately dispelled any notion of this being as a mere animal or thing. The creature's chest rose and fell in labored breaths. A wound on its side leaked a luminescent fluid that pooled on the floor, creating patterns that seemed almost purposeful. Jake knew instinctively that the being was dying. Without thinking, Jake pulled off his flannel shirt and pressed it against the wound. The creature flinched but didn't pull away. Instead, it raised one 3-fingered hand and touched Jake's forearm. The contact sent a jolt through him, not painful, but overwhelming. In that instant, Jake felt the creature's gratitude, its fear, its desperate hope for survival. Somehow, without words, they communicated. Jake worked quickly. He used his belt to create a makeshift bandage, securing the shirt tightly against the wound. The creature's breathing steadied slightly. From his truck, Jake retrieved a water jug and carefully helped the being drink. The water seemed to revitalize it somewhat, and the luminescent blood flow slowed. For hours, Jake sat with the alien, keeping vigil through the cold desert night. The creature would occasionally touch his hand, and each time, Jake sensed fragments of thoughts and feelings, images of distant stars, the terror of the crash, loneliness, and above all, a profound sense of being lost far from home. As dawn approached, Jake faced an impossible decision. He couldn't leave the creature here to die, but bringing it back to the ranch was madness. Marcus Henderson would either exploit this discovery for profit or, worse, call the authorities. Jake had heard enough stories about government black sites and disappeared witnesses to know how this could end. But looking into those intelligent, pleading eyes, Jake knew he had only one choice. He would protect this being, whatever the cost. He carefully helped the alien into his truck, covering it with a tarp and old blankets. The creature seemed to understand the need for concealment and lay still. Jake drove not to the main ranch buildings, but to an abandoned line shack in the far reaches of Henderson's property, a place forgotten by everyone except Jake, who sometimes used it as a refuge from the bunkhouse chaos. As he settled the alien inside, hiding it in a back room, Jake had no idea that his truck's GPS tracker, installed by Henderson to monitor all ranch vehicles, had recorded every mile of his nocturnal journey. The next morning arrived with the weight of 1,000 unspoken secrets. Jake woke before dawn in the abandoned line shack, having spent the night on the floor near his unlikely guest. The alien, he started thinking of it as 7, for the pattern of bioluminescent mark-side forehead was still weak but noticeably stronger than the previous night. The makeshift bandage Jake had applied had somehow fused with 7's skin, and the wound appeared to be healing at an impossible rate. Jake heated some canned soup on a propane camp stove, uncertain what 7 could eat. To his surprise, when he offered it, the alien consumed it eagerly, those large eyes reflecting what Jake could only interpret as gratitude. 7's communication method was becoming clearer, not telepathy exactly, but something close. When they touched, Jake received impressions, emotions, fragments of ideas that his brain struggled to translate into human concepts. Through this strange communion, Jake learned that 7's ship had been damaged by something in Earth's atmosphere, a meteor strike, or perhaps human-made space debris. 7 had been on a research mission, part of a larger expedition studying various worlds. The crash had damaged 7's long-range communication device, leaving them stranded and unable to contact their people. Jake knew he had to return to work before his absence raised questions. He left 7 with water, food, and a promise to return that evening. The alien seemed to understand, touching Jake's hand one more time in a gesture that had become their way of saying goodbye. At the main ranch, Jake tried to act normal, but everything felt different. As he went through the motions of checking cattle and repairing water pumps, his mind remained in that line shack with a being from another world. He caught himself looking at the sky differently, wondering which of those distant points of light was 7's home. Around mid-morning, Marcus Henderson's foreman, a hard-faced man named Dutch Wagner, approached Jake with an unusual request. "Boss wants to see you in his office, now." Jake's blood ran cold. Henderson never called individual ranch hands to his office. Such summons usually meant termination or serious trouble. As Jake drove to the main ranch house, a sprawling modern structure that seemed designed to intimidate, he frantically reviewed his actions. Had someone seen him? Had the GPS tracker betrayed him? Henderson's office was all dark wood and leather, decorated with mounted animal heads and expensive Western art. The rancher himself sat behind a massive desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. Dutch stood by the door, arms crossed, blocking the exit. "Jake," Henderson began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "you've been with us for 3 years now. Always punctual, hard worker, never complains. That's why what I'm about to show you confuses me." Henderson turned his computer monitor to face Jake. On the screen was a map with a red line tracing a route Jake's route from the previous night. The line led directly to the crash site, then to the abandoned line shack. GPS tracking on all vehicles, Henderson said, tapping the screen. Installed it 6 months ago after we had some equipment theft. Imagine my surprise when I see one of my trucks making strange detours in the middle of the night. So I took a little helicopter ride this morning to investigate. Jake's heart stopped. Henderson had seen the crash site. Found something very interesting out there, Henderson continued, standing and walking around the desk. Something that would make me a very rich man if handled correctly. Now, Jake, I'm going to ask you a simple question, and I strongly advise you to answer honestly. What did you find out there, and where is it now? Jake's mind raced. Lying was pointless. Henderson had already connected the dots. But telling the truth meant condemning Seven to become Henderson's property, a thing to be exploited and sold. I found a crash site, Jake said carefully. Something that wasn't from around here, and? Henderson pressed, his eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. And nothing survived, Jake lied. Just wreckage. Henderson's expression hardened. He nodded to Dutch, who stepped forward and grabbed Jake's arm in an iron grip. Jake, Henderson sighed, walking back to his desk. Do you think I'm stupid? The tracks leading away from that site, fresh tracks, tell a different story. You found something alive, and you moved it. The question is where? That abandoned line shack, I'm guessing? Jake said nothing, his jaw clenched tight. Henderson leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take me to whatever you found. Then you're going to sign a non-disclosure agreement I've had my lawyers draw up. In exchange, I'll pay you $100,000 more money than you'd make in 5 years working for me. You'll be able to take care of your sick mother, pay off her medical bills, maybe even set yourself up somewhere nice. All you have to do is show me where it is and walk away. The offer hung in the air like poison. $100,000. Jake thought of his mother's deteriorating condition, the mounting hospital bills, the collection agency calls he'd been avoiding. That money could save her life. But then he thought of Seven's eyes, the trust that had passed between them, the vulnerability of a being billions of miles from home placed in his hands. No, Jake said quietly. Henderson's face contorted with rage. No? You're telling me no? You ungrateful. He stopped himself, taking a breath. Dutch, take a couple of boys and tear apart that line shack. Bring me whatever you find. And Jake here? He's trespassing on my property. I want the sheriff called. As Dutch dragged Jake toward the door, Jake's mind worked frantically. He had maybe an hour before Henderson's men reached the line shack. Seven was still too weak to move quickly. They would be found, captured, and Jake would lose any chance to protect them. But in that moment of desperation, something remarkable happened. Jake felt a presence in his mind, Seven's presence. The alien was reaching out across the distance, and Jake understood. Seven had heard everything, sensed Jake's distress, and Seven had a plan. Dutch locked Jake in a storage room in the ranch's equipment barn, securing the heavy door with a padlock. Boss's orders, he muttered. You sit tight until the sheriff arrives. You're in a world of trouble, boy. Through the small, dusty window, Jake watched as Dutch gathered 3 other ranch hands and loaded into 2 trucks, heading toward the southern pastures where the line shack stood. Panic clawed at Jake's chest, but beneath it, he felt Seven's presence in his mind, calm, focused, and somehow reassuring. In his mind's eye, Jake saw what Seven was seeing. The alien had managed to stand, though it still moved with difficulty. Seven approached a piece of equipment that had survived the crash, a small device no bigger than a human palm, covered in the same shifting symbols that adorned the ship's interior. Seven's 3-fingered hands moved across its surface with purpose. Jake didn't understand the technology, but he grasped Seven's intention. The device was a distress beacon, damaged in the crash but potentially repairable. Seven was attempting to reconfigure it, to send a signal that Seven's people might detect. But the process would take time they didn't have. The mental connection between them strengthened. Jake realized that Seven's touch the previous night had created some kind of bond, a link that allowed limited communication across distance. Through this connection, Seven showed Jake something remarkable, a memory from Seven's world. Jake saw cities of crystalline spires reaching toward purple skies. He saw beings like Seven moving through spaces that defied human geometry, living in harmony with technology that seemed more grown than built. He felt Seven's love for family, for colleagues on the research expedition, for a culture that had long ago abandoned violence and exploitation in favor of knowledge and understanding. And he felt Seven's fear not just of capture, but of what humans like Henderson might do with the knowledge contained in Seven's ship and equipment. Technology that could revolutionize energy production, transportation, communication, all twisted into weapons or tools of control in the wrong hands. Jake understood then that this wasn't just about saving one alien. It was about protecting Earth from its own worst impulses, from men like Henderson who saw only profit and power. In the storage room, Jake searched frantically for a way out. The window was too small, the door too solid. But Jake hadn't survived years of ranch work without learning to think creatively. He found a crowbar and began working on the window frame, expanding the opening inch by painful inch. Meanwhile, at the line shack, Seven worked feverishly on the beacon. The device flickered to life, emitting a pulse of energy that rippled outward in dimensions beyond human perception. It wasn't strong enough yet to reach Seven's people. They were too far away, but it was enough for something else. Henderson's trucks pulled up to the line shack just as Jake squeezed through the expanded window, dropping 10 feet to the ground and rolling to absorb the impact. He sprinted toward his truck, parked near the equipment barn, but Dutch had taken the precaution of removing all vehicle keys. Jake started running on foot toward the southern pastures, knowing he'd never reach the line shack in time, but unable to stop himself from trying. The desert sun beat down mercilessly as he ran, his boots kicking up dust, his lungs burning. Then the sky changed. It started as a shimmer, like heat haze, but intensified rapidly. The air itself seemed to tear open, revealing a swirling vortex of blue and silver light. From this impossible wound in reality emerged 3 ships smaller than Seven, as crashed vessel but unmistakably of the same origin. They moved with fluid grace, positioning themselves above the line shack in a protective formation. Jake stopped running, staring in awe. Through his connection with Seven, he understood. The beacon had been detected not by Seven's distant people, but by other members of the research expedition colleagues who had been searching for Seven since the crash. At the line shack, Dutch and his men stumbled out of their trucks, staring up at the ships in terror. One of them dropped to his knees, muttering prayers. These were hardened men who'd faced down angry bulls and desert storms, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for this. A beam of light descended from the central ship, enveloping the line shack. When it faded, Seven stood outside, supported by 2 other beings of similar appearance. Seven looked toward the horizon, toward where Jake stood miles away, and Jake felt a wave of gratitude and farewell wash over him. But the rescue wasn't complete. One of the ships broke formation and descended toward the main ranch house, where Henderson stood on his porch, phone in hand, already calling what Jake assumed were military contacts. The ship positioned itself directly above Henderson, and a voice emanated from it speaking perfect English through some form of translation. Marcus Henderson, you have witnessed our presence and located the remains of our damaged vessel. By the laws of our people and the principles of galactic civilization, you are now faced with a choice. You may attempt to exploit this contact for personal gain, in which case we will be forced to neutralize all evidence of our presence, including the memories of all witnesses. Or you may accept our thanks for the protection one of your kind offered our colleague and allow us to depart in peace. Your decision will determine not only your fate but your world's readiness for eventual contact with the greater galactic community." Henderson stood frozen, his face pale. Jake, still connected to Seven, felt his boss's mind racing through calculations, military intervention, media attention, wealth beyond imagination. But he also felt Henderson's fear, the primal terror of facing something utterly beyond his control. The ship waited, hovering silently. Dutch and his men had gathered near their trucks, unwilling to move. The entire ranch seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Henderson lowered his phone. His voice, when he spoke, was small and broken. "Take your people and go. Just ... Go." The ship's light intensified for a moment, and Jake felt something sweep across the ranch, a gentle pulse that touched every mind present. Memories were being altered, not erased but softened, made dreamlike and uncertain. Everyone except Jake, protected by his bond with Seven, would remember this day as strange but unclear, like trying to recall a particularly vivid nightmare. The ships rose silently into the desert sky, carrying Seven and the recovered technology away from Earth. Jake watched them climb higher and higher until they vanished into the afternoon sun, leaving no trace of their presence except the empty line shack and a crater in the desert where Seven's ship had crashed, a crater that the alien technology had somehow smoothed and naturalized, making it appear as just another geological feature of the ancient landscape. Jake walked back to the ranch in a daze, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The bond with Seven had faded to a whisper, a distant echo that told him Seven was safe, traveling through space toward reunion with their people. But Jake felt the absence keenly, like losing a friend he'd only just begun to know. When he arrived at the main ranch buildings, he found chaos. Dutch and the other hands stood around in confusion, unable to explain why they'd driven out to the southern pastures or what exactly they'd been looking for. Their memories of the ships were fragmentary, like pieces of a dream slipping away in morning light. They remembered light, a sense of awe and fear, but the details eluded them. Henderson sat on his porch, staring into space. When Jake approached, the rancher looked at him with an expression Jake had never seen before: uncertainty, even humility. "Jake," Henderson said slowly, as if testing each word, "something happened today? Something important. I can't quite remember what, but I know it changed something in me." He paused, rubbing his temples. "I've been thinking about this ranch, about how I've run things, about how I've treated people." Jake said nothing, waiting. The alien technology had altered Henderson's memories, but left him with emotional impressions, a sense that he'd defaced something vast and had been found wanting. "That storage room, you were locked in," Henderson continued. "I remember locking you up, but I can't remember why." "What did you do?" "I tried to protect something that needed protecting," Jake answered honestly. Henderson nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense despite his incomplete memories. "And I tried to stop you. Tried to take something that wasn't mine." He stood up, walked to the porch railing, and looked out over his vast holdings. "You know what I realized today, Jake? All this, the land, the cattle, the money, it doesn't mean a damn thing if you've lost your humanity in the process of getting it." Jake remained silent, unsure where this was going. The Henderson he'd known for 3 years didn't speak like this, didn't think like this. "I'm making changes," Henderson announced, turning to face Jake. "Starting now. Real wages for the hands, $15 an hour, plus benefits. Health insurance for everyone, including their families. And that includes your mother, Jake. Her medical bills? Consider them paid. I've got more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. It's time some of it did some actual good." Jake's breath caught. "Mr. Henderson, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Henderson interrupted. "I don't remember exactly why, but I know I do. Something happened today that showed me what kind of man I've become, and I don't like it. So I'm changing. And you know what? You're promoted. Foreman position just opened up. Dutch is a good man, but he follows orders without thinking. You ... You have a conscience. You try to protect something, even when it cost you everything. That's the kind of man I need helping me run this place. Jake struggled to process this transformation. Was it real, or just a temporary effect of whatever the aliens had done? Through the fading connection with Seven, he sensed confirmation the memory alteration had been selective, designed to remove specific knowledge of alien contact while leaving emotional and moral impressions intact. Henderson would never remember Seven or the ships, but he would remember the feeling of being judged and found wanting, of facing something greater than himself and recognizing his own smallness. I'll need to think about it, Jake said carefully. The foreman position. Think all you want, Henderson replied. Offer stands. Meanwhile, you take the rest of the week off, paid. Go see your mother. Tell her everything's going to be okay now. He paused, a strange look crossing his face. Jake, do you believe in miracles? I believe in unexpected kindness, Jake answered. In people being better than they think they can be. Henderson nodded, seeming satisfied with this response. Yeah, maybe that's what happened today. Some kind of wake-up call. He extended his hand to Jake. I'm sorry for how I've treated you and the others. That changes now. Jake shook his hand, seeing genuine resolve in his boss's eyes. Whatever the aliens had done, it had worked. Henderson wouldn't remember Seven, but he would remember the need to be a better man. Over the following days, Jake watched Henderson make good on his promises. Wages increased, health insurance was instituted, and the bunkhouse was renovated with better facilities. Ranch hands who'd been planning to leave suddenly reconsidered. Word spread through the county about the changes at Henderson Ranch, and Marcus Henderson's reputation began to shift from ruthless tycoon to enlightened employer. Jake called his mother in Texas and told her the medical bills would be taken care of. Her tears of relief and gratitude brought tears to his own eyes. When she asked how this miracle had happened, Jake simply said, "Someone showed my boss what really matters in life." But at night, lying in his bunk, Jake would look up at the stars and remember. He remembered Seven's eyes, the weight of trust placed in his hands, the brief but profound connection with someone from another world. The bond had faded almost completely now, leaving only the faintest sense that Seven was well, was home, was grateful. Jake had lost something irreplaceable, the chance to know Seven better, to learn about worlds beyond Earth, to be part of something larger than himself. But he'd gained something too. He'd learned that one person's choices could matter, that compassion had power, and that protecting the vulnerable was worth any cost. The desert kept its secrets. The crash site became just another landmark in the vast Arizona wilderness, visited by no one. Henderson's ranch continued its operations, now with a reputation for fair treatment and honest work. And Jake Brennan, still just a ranch hand despite Henderson's offer. He'd eventually declined the foreman position, preferring the simplicity of his current role, went about his days with a secret knowledge that changed everything. He had met someone from the stars, and in that meeting had discovered what it truly meant to be human. 3 months after Seven's departure, Jake had settled into a strange new normal. Henderson Ranch thrived under its new management philosophy, and Jake had earned respect not just as a hard worker, but as the man whose mysterious actions had somehow catalyzed Henderson's transformation. Though no one except Jake remembered exactly what happened that day, everyone sensed he'd been central to the change. Jake had finally accepted a modified role, not foreman, but a kind of advisor to Henderson on ranch operations and employee welfare. It gave him enough additional income to fully support his mother's ongoing treatment while maintaining the hands-on work he loved. His mother's health had stabilized, and she'd even made plans to visit Arizona in the spring. Life was good, but Jake found himself plagued by dreams. Not nightmares exactly, but vivid visions of crystalline cities and purple skies. Sometimes he'd wake with the sensation of Seven's three-fingered hand touching his arm, the ghost of their connection lingering in his mind. He'd learned to accept these as echoes of his brief but profound encounter with the impossible. Then, one November evening, everything changed again. Jake was checking the southern pastures near sunset when he noticed something unusual, a shimmering in the air, similar to what he'd seen before, but more controlled, more deliberate. His heart raced as a small craft materialized, descending gracefully to land near his truck. This ship was different from the rescue vessels, more elegant, with markings that seemed to shift and flow across its surface. A portal opened, and Seven emerged. Jake's breath caught. Seven looked different, healthier, stronger, moving with fluid grace rather than the pained shuffle of their first meeting. The wound that had nearly killed Seven had healed completely, leaving only a faint silvery mark on the being's side. Seven wore a garment that seemed woven from light itself, marking some kind of status or role Jake didn't understand. Seven approached, and when their eyes met, the bond snapped back into place instantly, stronger than before. Jake was flooded with emotion, Seven's joy at returning, gratitude that had only grown over months of separation, and something else, purpose. Seven touched Jake's hand, and in that moment, Jake understood everything. Seven's rescue had created ripples in the galactic community. The story of a poor human risking everything to save an alien life, expecting nothing in return, had spread among Seven's people. It had sparked debates about Earth's readiness for contact, about humanity's potential despite its violent history. Seven had become something of an ambassador, sharing the experience with councils and governing bodies across multiple star systems. And now Seven had returned with an offer. The Galactic Council has been watching Earth for a long time. Seven communicated through their connection, the words forming in Jake's mind. We've seen your wars, your cruelty, your exploitation of your own world. But we've also seen your art, your compassion, your capacity for growth. You, Jake Brennan, represent the best of what humanity could become. Through the bond, Seven showed Jake images of other worlds, not just Seven's home, but dozens of civilizations that formed the loose confederation known as the Galactic Council. Beings of every imaginable form, living in harmony, exploring the universe together. It was beautiful and terrifying in its vastness. We're extending an invitation, Seven continued. Not to all of Earth, your world isn't ready for open contact, but to individuals who demonstrate the qualities necessary for galactic citizenship. Compassion, courage, wisdom, and the ability to see beyond one's own species or culture. Jake's mind reeled. You want me to leave Earth? We want you to be a bridge, Seven corrected gently. To learn about the galaxy, yes. To see other worlds and peoples. But also to return, to help prepare humanity for eventual membership in the galactic community. It would take years, perhaps decades of your time, but you would be part of something unprecedented. The first official human ambassador to the stars. Jake thought of everything he'd be leaving behind. His mother, now recovering but still needing him. The ranch, where he'd finally found a place of respect and purpose. The simple life he'd built, no longer plagued by poverty and struggle. But he also thought of the stars he'd stared at every night since Seven left, wondering what wonders they held. He thought of humanity's potential, the chance to guide his species toward a better future. He thought of the profound loneliness of being the only person on Earth who truly knew what waited out there in the cosmos. My mother, Jake said aloud. She's sick. I can't leave her. Seven's response was immediate. We anticipated this concern. Our medical technology is far beyond Earth's current capabilities. We can heal your mother completely, eliminate the cancer that grows in her cells. She would live many more years in perfect health. This is not payment or bribe. It is simple compassion. She raised someone worthy of the stars. She deserves to see him reach them. Jake felt tears streaming down his face. The offer was everything he'd never dared to dream. But accepting it meant embracing the impossible, leaving behind everything familiar for the unknown. And Henderson? Jake asked. The ranch? Everyone here? Your work here is complete, Seven assured him. Marcus Henderson's transformation is permanent. The emotional impressions we left will continue to guide him. This place no longer needs you, but the galaxy does. And your world, though it doesn't know it yet, desperately needs someone like you speaking for it among the stars. Jake looked back toward the ranch, where lights were beginning to flicker on as evening settled over the desert. He thought of Dutch and the other hands, of Henderson's genuine attempts at redemption, of the life he'd carved out for himself from nothing. Then he looked at Seven, at the ship waiting behind them, at the invitation to step beyond every boundary humanity had ever known. I need to say goodbye, Jake said finally. To my mother, to Henderson. I need to make sure everything's settled. Seven's emotions radiated approval and understanding. We can wait. Take the time you need. When you're ready, simply come to this place and call out to the stars. We'll hear you, and we'll come. Seven returned to the ship, but before the portal closed, the alien turned back one more time. You saved my life, Jake Brennan. Now let me show you the universe. The ship vanished as silently as it appeared, leaving Jake alone in the desert twilight with the weight of an impossible decision settling on his shoulders. Jake took 2 weeks to settle his affairs, each day bringing him closer to a decision that would irrevocably change his life. He drove to Texas to see his mother, telling her everything. To his surprise, she believed him immediately, perhaps sensing the profound truth in his words. When Seven's people arrived to heal her, a different alien than Seven, a medical specialist who worked through the night, Jake watched his mother's color return, her strength rebuild, the years of illness melt away like morning frost. Go, she told him the next morning, standing stronger than she had in 5 years. I didn't raise you to play it safe, Jake. I raised you to be a good man, and good men do what's right even when it's terrifying. This is your calling. I feel it in my bones. Henderson took the news with surprising grace. Whatever the aliens had done to his memories, it had left him open to the extraordinary. I knew something special happened that day, he said when Jake explained he was leaving. I knew you were part of something bigger than this ranch. You go, Jake. Do whatever it is you need to do. Your job will be here if you ever want to come back. Jake signed over his meager savings to a trust for the ranch hands' families, distributed his few possessions, and said goodbye to men who'd become friends. Each farewell felt like closing a chapter of his life, but also like opening a door to something magnificent. On the appointed night, Jake drove to the spot where he'd first found Seven's crashed ship. The crater had long since been naturally filled and weathered, leaving no trace of the extraordinary events that had occurred there. He stood under the vast Arizona sky, stars blazing in their millions, and spoke the words Seven had taught him, sounds that human vocal cords could barely shape. A phrase that meant, I am ready to walk among the stars. The response was immediate. Reality rippled, and Seven's ship appeared, larger now, modified with chambers suitable for human physiology. The portal opened, and Seven stood there, wearing something that looked like a formal uniform, covered in markings that Jake now understood indicated Seven's new role as Earth Liaison Officer. Are you certain? Seven asked, though the bond between them already knew the answer. I'm certain, Jake replied, shouldering his small pack, the only belongings he was bringing. Let's go meet the universe. He stepped through the portal, and it closed behind him. The ship's interior was beautiful, a perfect blend of the organic and technological. Through viewing panels that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, Jake watched Earth fall away, first the ranch, then Arizona, then the whole glowing blue marble of his homeworld, suspended in the darkness like a precious gem. You will return, Seven promised, standing beside him. In time. But first, you must learn. You must see. You must understand what humanity is reaching toward. The ship accelerated to speeds that made Jake's physics education seem like ancient mythology. Stars blurred and stretched, and then they were traveling through something that wasn't quite space, a dimension where distance had different meaning. 7 called it the slip flow, the pathway between worlds that made galactic civilization possible. Their first destination was 7's homeworld, a planet orbiting a blue sun 300 light-years from Earth. Jake stepped out on the soil that no human had ever touched, breathed air that no human lungs had ever tasted, and was greeted by 7's family beings who embraced him with genuine warmth, treating him not as a curiosity, but as the person who'd saved their beloved relative's life. Over the following months, Jake began his education. He learned galactic history spanning millions of years. He studied the principles that allowed different species to coexist peacefully despite vast differences in biology, psychology, and culture. He met representatives from dozens of civilizations, each with their own unique perspective on existence. He learned that the galaxy was not a utopia. There were conflicts, disagreements, even occasional violence. But the overall trend was toward cooperation, toward using the vast resources of space to ensure everyone's needs were met. War was not eliminated but transformed into debates and competitions. Poverty was nearly unknown. Art and science flourished in ways that made human achievement seem like a first tentative step. And everywhere Jake went, his story preceded him. The human who'd risked everything for an alien life became a kind of parable, a proof that Earth harbored the seeds of galactic citizenship despite its current troubles. Other species viewed humanity with new interest, no longer seeing just violence and exploitation, but also potential. Jake attended sessions of the Galactic Council, where 7 now held a position representing newly contacted species. He watched debates about Earth's status, about when and how to make open contact, and its planet. Others cautioned patience, insisting that species must find their own path to maturity. Jake found himself speaking in these debates, offering perspective that no alien could provide. He explained humanity's complexity, the coexistence of cruelty and compassion, the capacity for both destruction and creation. He spoke of people like his mother, who worked herself to exhaustion caring for others. Of Henderson, who despite his flaws had proven capable of profound change. Of the ranch hands who lived quiet lives of dignity and hard work. "We're not monsters," Jake told an assembly of beings from across the galaxy. "We're young. We're struggling. We make terrible mistakes. But we're also capable of incredible beauty, of sacrifice, of love that transcends all boundaries. I'm proof of that. 7 is proof of that. What happened between us shows that humans can look beyond themselves, can embrace the strange and different, can choose compassion over fear." His words carried weight precisely because he was human, because he'd lived Earth's struggles and limitations. The Council voted to extend Earth's probationary period, to watch and wait rather than intervene, but also to increase subtle guidance inspiring key scientists, artists, and leaders toward ideas that would gently steer humanity toward maturity. And they authorized something unprecedented, a small group of humans, carefully selected, to be brought into galactic society as ambassadors in training. Jake would return to Earth to identify candidates, people like himself who combine compassion with courage, wisdom with humility. 2 years after leaving Earth, though, time moved strangely in the slip flow. Making exact measurements difficult, Jake returned home. 7's ship descended into the same Arizona desert where everything had begun, touching down not far from Henderson Ranch under the cover of night. Jake stepped onto Earth soil feeling like a different person. He'd seen wonders beyond imagination, learned truths that rewrote his understanding of existence, and carried within him knowledge that could transform human civilization. But he also felt the weight of responsibility, the burden of being a bridge between worlds. He visited his mother first, finding her thriving in a small house Henderson had built for her on ranch property. She looked 20 years younger, healthy and vibrant thanks to alien medicine. When she saw Jake, she ran to embrace him, tears streaming down her face. "Look at you," she whispered. "You've got stars in your eyes now. Real stars." Jake spent a week with her, sharing carefully edited stories of his journey. Some truths were too vast for words, experiences that human language couldn't capture. But he conveyed the essential message. Humanity had a future among the stars if it could overcome its worst impulses. Henderson had continued his transformation, expanding his reform efforts beyond the ranch. He'd become an advocate for workers' rights throughout the region, using his wealth and influence to push for better conditions across multiple industries. When Jake told him the truth, that alien intervention had sparked his change of heart, Henderson laughed. "I wondered if something like that had happened," the rancher admitted. "Sometimes I'd get flashes, fragments of memories that didn't quite fit. But you know what? I'm grateful. Whatever they did, whoever they were, they saved me from myself. I was becoming a monster, Jake. They showed me a better way." Jake began his work, identifying potential ambassadors. He traveled the country, guided by instincts honed during his time among the stars. He found a pediatric surgeon in Chicago who'd spent her career treating children in war zones, a marine biologist in California who dedicated his life to protecting ocean ecosystems, a teacher in Alabama who transformed an underfunded school through sheer determination and love for his students. Each person he approached faced this same impossible choice. He had to leave behind everything familiar to become part of something vast and strange. Some accepted immediately, drawn by the call of the unknown. Others needed time, wrestling with the decision just as Jake had. But all of them shared certain qualities: compassion that transcended tribal boundaries, courage to face the unknown, and wisdom to understand that humanity's current path led nowhere good. Over the following years, Jake built a network, a secret society of human ambassadors learning galactic ways, preparing Earth for eventual open contact. They worked behind the scenes, influencing policy, inspiring change, planting seeds that would eventually blossom into a unified, peaceful human civilization capable of joining the galactic community. 7 remained Jake's closest friend and ally, visiting Earth regularly to coordinate efforts. Their bond had deepened into something beyond friendship, a connection between two beings who'd saved each other in different ways. 7 had shown Jake the universe. Jake had shown 7 humanity's potential. On quiet nights, Jake would stand in the Arizona desert near Henderson Ranch, looking up at stars he'd now visited. He thought about the poor cowboy he'd been, struggling to survive on minimum wage, never imagining anything beyond his next paycheck. That man had died the night he'd crawled into a crashed alien ship. In his place stood someone new, a bridge between worlds, a guardian of humanity's future, a living proof that compassion could transcend all boundaries. The ranch still operated, still employed people who worked hard under fair conditions. Henderson still ran it, though he'd handed over daily operations to Dutch, who'd proven himself worthy of trust. Jake maintained a small cabin on the property, a place to return between journeys, a reminder of where he'd come from. Sometimes late at night, ranch hands would see lights in the sky strange, beautiful lights that moved with impossible grace. They'd mention it over breakfast, speculating about aircraft or satellites. Jake would smile and say nothing, knowing those lights carried ambassadors returning from the stars, or alien observers checking on Earth's progress, or sometimes 7 coming to visit an old friend. The secret weighed on Jake, the knowledge he couldn't share with most of humanity. But he bore it willingly, understanding that some truths had to be earned. Earth would join the galactic community eventually, in decades or perhaps centuries, when humanity had matured enough to to handle the revelation. Until then, people like Jake worked in shadows, gently guiding their species toward its destiny. And in his quieter moments, Jake reflected on the profound truth his journey had taught him, that greatness wasn't about wealth or power or fame. It was about the choices you made when no one was watching, the compassion you showed to those who couldn't repay you, the courage to protect the vulnerable even when it cost you everything. He'd been a poor cowboy who'd saved an alien's life. That single act of kindness had opened the universe to him and offered humanity a path to the stars. It was proof that one person's choices mattered, that compassion had power beyond measure, and that sometimes the most ordinary people were capable of the most extraordinary things. Jake Brennan had learned to walk among the stars, but he never forgot the desert soil where his journey began, or the simple truth that had started it all. When someone needs help, you help them. Everything else follows from that. The universe itself had shown him that much was true.